Yesterday, an entire country made a decision that could reshape childhood as we know it. South Korea, home to Samsung, the world's smartphone capital, just banned smartphones and digital devices from all classrooms starting March 2026. This isn't just another education policy. This is a desperate attempt to save a generation that's drowning in digital addiction. And the data they uncovered is absolutely terrifying. In the next minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why one of the most tech-advanced nations on Earth is now running away from technology. The statistics they found will shock you. The results from other countries that tried this will surprise you. And by the end, you'll understand why this single decision might trigger a global revolution in how we think about children and screens. I'm your host at World Shift, where we decode the changes reshaping our world. Today's shift, the beginning of the end for smartphones in schools worldwide. Here's what we'll cover. The shocking data that forced South Korea's hand. What happened when other countries tried this? The massive pushback that's already starting. And most importantly, why this could be coming to your country sooner than you think. So grab a coffee, put your phone on silent, and let's dive into a story that might change everything you think about technology and education. Let's start with what exactly happened. On 28th of August 2025, South Korea's Ministry of Education announced a comprehensive ban on smartphones and digital devices in elementary and middle school classrooms, effective March 2026. But here's what makes this unprecedented. South Korea isn't some tech-skeptical country. This is the nation that gave us Samsung, LG, and some of the world's fastest internet speeds. Korean students are among the most digitally connected on the planet. So when they say technology has gone too far, the world needs to pay attention. The law is surprisingly comprehensive. Students cannot use smartphones, tablets, or smartwatches during class hours. Teachers are required to collect devices at the beginning of each day. Emergency exceptions exist, but they're extremely limited. The government is backing this with serious money. 18 billion won, about $13 million, to install secure storage systems in schools nationwide. They're not messing around. But here's the most telling part. This decision wasn't made by politicians or angry parents. It was driven by data. Terrifying, undeniable data about what screens are doing to Korean children's brains. South Korea's youth suicide rate is the highest among developed nations. Their birth rate is the lowest in the world. And according to government studies, both of these crises are directly linked to digital addiction among young people. When I tell you the numbers they found, you'll understand why they panicked. The statistics that drove this decision are absolutely staggering, and they should terrify every parent on the planet. Korean teenagers spend an average of 7.8 hours per day on their smartphones. That's more time than they spend sleeping. Let that sink in. They interact with screens more than they interact with the physical world. But it gets worse. 30% of Korean teenagers show clinical signs of smartphone addiction. That's not spending too much time online. That's actual, diagnosable addiction with withdrawal symptoms, anxiety, and depression when separated from their devices. Here's the part that made headlines. Korean students' attention spans have dropped by 40% in just 5 years. Teachers report that students literally cannot focus on a single task for more than 3 to 4 minutes without checking their phones. Sleep disorders among Korean teens have increased by 70% since 2019. Why? Because they're staying awake scrolling social media until 3, 4, even 5 a.m. Their developing brains are being rewired by constant dopamine hits from notifications, likes, and comments. Physical health is collapsing too. Vision problems among Korean students have doubled. Neck and back issues, formerly seen only in adults, are now common in 12-year-olds who spend hours hunched over screens. But here's the most disturbing finding. Social skills are disappearing. Korean educators report that many students literally cannot have face-to-face conversations. They can text for hours but freeze up when asked to speak to another human being directly. The government realized they weren't just seeing an education problem. They were watching an entire generation lose the ability to be human. And Korea isn't alone. Similar patterns are emerging worldwide, but Korea was the first to have the courage to say enough. South Korea isn't the first to try this. Several countries and regions have implemented smartphone bans in schools, and the results are fascinating. France banned smartphones in schools for students under 15 back in 2018. What happened? Academic performance improved immediately. Students started talking to each other during breaks instead of staring at screens. Playground games made a comeback. Teachers reported better classroom engagement within weeks. But here's the kicker. Youth anxiety and depression rates in French schools dropped significantly. Turns out, removing the constant pressure of social media comparisons and cyberbullying during school hours had massive mental health benefits. The UK has been more cautious, but several school districts have implemented voluntary bans. The results are consistently positive. Better test scores, improved social interaction, fewer disciplinary problems. Italy went even further. They banned homework via digital devices, forcing students to write by hand and use physical books. Italian educators report that handwriting has improved, and students show better retention of information they write versus type. But the most interesting case study comes from a small town in Australia that implemented a complete smartphone ban for anyone under 16. Not just in schools, but everywhere. Within 6 months, youth crime dropped to zero, library usage increased by 400%, and local sports clubs saw a surge in teenage participation. However, not everyone succeeded. When some US school districts tried smartphone bans, they faced massive pushback from parents who worried about emergency contact. Many reversed their policies within a year. The key difference? Countries that succeeded treated this as a public health issue, not just an education policy. They had government backing, parent education programs, and comprehensive support systems. South Korea is learning from these global experiments, which is why their approach is so comprehensive. Predictably, South Korea's decision has triggered massive controversy, and the battle lines are exactly what you'd expect. Tech companies are furious. Samsung, whose smartphones are banned in their home country's schools, issued carefully worded statements about balanced approaches to technology integration. Translation: they're terrified this trend might spread globally. Parent groups are split down the middle. Progressive parents largely support the ban, citing concerns about addiction and mental health. But many others argue that smartphones are essential for emergency contact and that kids need to learn digital responsibility. Students themselves, the reactions are fascinating. Younger students seem largely indifferent. Many admit they'll be relieved to have a break from the constant pressure of social media during school. But older teenagers are outraged, with some organising protests and online campaigns against the ban. International education experts are watching closely. Some praise South Korea for having the courage to prioritise child welfare over tech industry profits. Others worry about creating a digital divide between Korean students and their globally connected peers. But here's what's really telling. Similar legislation is already being drafted in Japan, Singapore, and several European countries. South Korea might have lit a fuse that spreads worldwide. The question isn't whether this controversy will continue. It's whether other countries will have the political will to follow South Korea's lead when the evidence becomes overwhelming. This South Korean decision is about much more than education policy. It's a canary in the coal mine for a global crisis that most countries are still pretending doesn't exist. Think about it. If South Korea, the most tech-integrated society on Earth, believes smartphones are destroying their children, what does that say about the rest of us? The implications are staggering. If this ban succeeds, expect copycat legislation worldwide within 24 months. Countries are already studying South Korea's approach closely, and preliminary data from France and other early adopters is extremely positive. But it goes deeper than schools. This represents the first major pushback against big tech's colonization of childhood. For decades, tech companies have treated children as experimental subjects for addictive algorithms and profit-driven design. South Korea is saying, no more. The economic implications are massive too. If smartphone bans spread globally, it could reshape the entire mobile device industry. Companies would be forced to design products for healthy usage rather than maximum engagement. Most importantly, this could be the beginning of a new approach to child development, one that prioritizes mental health, social skills, and genuine learning over digital engagement metrics. The children entering South Korean schools under this new system will be fundamentally different from their globally connected peers. In 10 years, we'll have a real-world control group to study the effects of smartphone-free education. If those kids turn out healthier, happier, and more successful, it won't just change education. It will change everything. So here's where we stand. South Korea has just fired the first shot in what might become the biggest battle of the 21st century, the fight for children's minds and futures. The data is clear. Smartphones are rewiring developing brains in ways we're only beginning to understand. The mental health crisis among young people correlates directly with smartphone adoption. And South Korea has decided they won't sacrifice another generation to tech company profits. Whether this succeeds depends on execution. France showed it can work, but it requires political will, parent support, and comprehensive planning. South Korea has all three. If you're a parent, educator, or policymaker watching this unfold, ask yourself, what would it take for your country to make the same choice? What level of crisis would justify putting child welfare above tech industry interests? This is World Shift, and we're just getting started. Next week, we'll dive into Japan's response to South Korea's decision and why tech companies are quietly preparing for a global war against smartphone bans. If you want to stay ahead of the shifts reshaping our world, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what's really happening in South Korea and why it matters. And here's my question for you. Do you think your country should follow South Korea's lead? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. The world is shifting. The question is, which direction will it go? See you next time.